What's growing on, gardeners? It's Tuesday, June 4th, and things are heating up quickly here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. Now that it is officially June, we have to start transitioning our mindset away from spring gardening and towards summer gardening because now everything changes. And on today's video, I'm going to share with you 5 critical gardening tasks that every gardener should do right now in June.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Critical gardening task number 1 is something so simple yet so few gardeners do it, and that is to establish a walkthrough routine around your garden. So me personally, I like to have a 3 to 5 minute walkthrough of my garden every morning and every evening. This can be before you leave for work, grab a cup of coffee and do a garden walkthrough, and when you get home from work, grab a cold drink and do another leisurely stroll around your garden. Doing this, you can catch all sorts of problems that you would otherwise miss. What kind of things can you catch by doing a simple walkthrough? Well, you can catch things like pest infestations, nutrient deficiencies, disease problems. All of these problems are very easy to correct when they're just beginning, but if things get away from you in a matter of only 1, 2, or 3 days, minor infestations or outbreaks can explode, and then it can be too late. Let me show you what I'm talking about. You can learn a lot by simply walking through your garden, because by walking through, you will be looking at things, and you will notice things by the basic power of observation. One thing that I noticed this morning on my garden walkthrough is that I had a couple of leaves that were nipped on this tomato plant. This means some type of worm or caterpillar outbreak. So I looked on the plant and I found a caterpillar and I was able to smush it. Now, had I not done that garden walkthrough, that caterpillar in a matter of 24 hours could have decimated this entire plant. But because I simply took a minute to walk through my garden, I noticed that some of the leaves had been stripped away and I was able to rescue that tomato plant. And even though it's only been a matter of a few hours, I'm already starting to see a sucker push growth, so the plant is already recovering. These are the kinds of issues that you can catch with simple garden walkthroughs. Other things that you can catch are diseases starting to grab hold. So this plant right here looks pristine, but down at the bottom I'm starting to see some symptoms of early blight. So right here I can simply cut off that stem and then remove it and throw it away. Had I not found that, the disease will be more likely to spread up the plant. Another issue I noticed this morning was this tomato plant out of nowhere started wilting. This is obviously some type of wilt virus, which spreads from plant to plant. So unfortunately, this beautiful plant is toast, but I need to rip it out as soon as possible before it spreads to the other plants right here. This is one of those unfortunate soil-borne problems. So while it will hurt to lose that tomato plant, it's a heck of a lot better than losing every single plant in this bed. Garden problems go from 0 to 100 really quickly, so if you can do this walkthrough 1 to 2 times a day, simply by the power of observation, you will notice so many little tiny problems that you can correct them when they're small before they blow up and compromise your entire garden. Critical gardening task number 2 is establishing a defined fertilizing routine. Now, many of us fertilized our plants when we transplanted them or sowed the seeds earlier in the year, but for whatever reason, life gets in the way, or maybe we just get forgetful or lazy and we stop. We drop off and we fertilize them less throughout the season as it just starts to escape our mind. And this is a problem because as plants grow, they require more and more nutrition. The heat is going to build, which is going to place more stress on the plants. You're going to have the plants flowering and setting fruit and trying to take those fruits to maturity. So it is critical that we establish a good, strong fertilizing routine to keep the plants well fed. Otherwise, they will start to go into decline and perform poorly. Now, I usually recommend scaling your fertilizer routine to the medium that you're growing in. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm growing a lot of my tomatoes, cucumbers, and squash in 20-gallon grow bags. So because the plants are confined to the nutrients that are stored in this bag and they can't reach their roots out and dig through the earth for additional nutrients, you have to fertilize these more often. They are also very prone to washout from rain or over irrigation. So if you water them too much or you get heavy rain, you wash out a lot of those nutrients. So for that reason, I generally recommend that you fertilize any container gardens every 7 to 10 days. And if you live in a rainy climate, go closer to 7 days because they will wash out more often. If you're in a drier climate where they don't get washed out as much, you may be able to go as far as 10 days. But it's very good to be more aggressive in your fertilizer routine when you're growing in a confined spaced container. Now, if you're growing in in-ground garden beds or in earth gardens, you can usually stretch that fertilizing routine to about every 10 to 14 days because in-ground garden soil typically holds onto nutrients a little bit better and is more resistant to washout. But depending on how much rain you get and if you accidentally over-irrigate, you may need to change that schedule accordingly. My typical garden routine is as follows. I like to top dress all of my plants with 1 to 1.5 tablespoons of an organic all-purpose fertilizer, something around a 555 NPK like this, and then follow up with a 1/2 to 1 tablespoon dusting of bone meal. Between the organic all-purpose fertilizer and the bone meal, you should have enough nutrients and things like calcium and phosphorus to help support healthy, strong roots and a strong bloom cycle. A top dressing means that you just sprinkle it in a ring around the plants, around the roots, then take your fingertips and try to work it into the top inch or so of soil. Then after the dry granulated organics have been placed, you want to get them wet to help facilitate the breakdown. And I like to wet them with a water-soluble fertilizer. I like to take Alaska fish emulsion and place about 2 to 3 tablespoons per gallon into a watering can, and then mix with that a little bit of Jack's 20-20-20 or another water-soluble fertilizer like that, and then I wet down the organics. These water-soluble fertilizers are immediately bioavailable to the plants, so they will start working immediately. The organics take a few weeks to break down, so they won't be immediately bioavailable. If you've neglected your fertilizer routine, you definitely want to follow up with some type of water-soluble fertilizer. Whatever you choose is fine as long as they are relatively balanced. If you're curious about any of these fertilizer products for your convenience, I will place links to them all down in the video description, and I will also drop a playlist that I've made over the years that has all of my different fertilizer videos archived in it for your convenience as well. Critical gardening task number 3 is something that has revolutionized my garden and has saved me so much time and money over the long run, and that is to set up drip irrigation. Now, I know that a lot of gardeners are resistant to set up drip irrigation because there is an initial investment in money and time, but if you're willing to put out that investment up front, then you will benefit from it for years. Because what happens is, when we transplant our vegetables into our garden, the weather is pleasant in the spring, and the plants aren't that large, so they don't have a lot of demand for irrigation. But then the weather starts getting hot, the plants start getting bigger, it gets dry, you get hit by drought, and then the watering demands increase exponentially. So if we don't set up drip irrigation, we have to drag out the hose and painstakingly water our plants in 80, 85, 90 plus degree heat and sit there and sweat. And we just don't look forward to it. It is absolutely brutal. That is why you want to automate the task, because what happens is people just hate watering in the extreme heat, and they don't do it, and the plants suffer as a result. So if you're willing to put in the legwork right now and put down that drip irrigation and automate it while the weather is still pretty good, you won't have to drag yourself out in the heat of the summer and painstakingly water the plants. You'll be able to just turn on your spigot and everything will happen for you. And that's what I've chosen to do. Instead of painstakingly watering all of my individual plants and overhead watering and splashing around the soil and spreading disease everywhere, because that is how most soil-borne diseases are spread. It's from watering that then splashes soil on the undersides of the leaves. I've chosen to set up drip irrigation. And these drippers have been watering the entire time I've been filming, so I haven't had to spend any effort at all watering my garden. So for a modest investment of time and money up front, you will save a dramatic amount of time and money in the long run, and you will spread a lot less disease around because drip irrigation doesn't splash very much at all. So it's really safe to water your plants and much more efficient. Now, if you've wanted to set up drip irrigation in your garden but you don't know how, I have spent a lot of time crafting a complete DIY drip irrigation playlist, and I will link to that down in the video description. It will show you how to install install virtually any type of drip irrigation, clear and easy to understand. And if you want to know where I think is the best place to buy drip irrigation supplies, that would be Drip Depot. All of my stuff is from them. Their quality is absolutely incredible. The prices are great. I will place a link down in the video description to my Drip Depot affiliate store. You will be able to find everything that you need there. Task number 4 that every gardener should do in June is to mulch around all of their plants. And this is a very important step. Mulch is of critical importance because not only does it add organic matter back to your soil as it decomposes, which is good for the long-term health of your soil, but it helps maintain moisture so you have to irrigate a lot less, and it helps suppress weeds. And of course, 2 of the biggest problems that we deal with in summer when it gets very hot is moisture control and weed seed germination. This is one of the best visuals that I could give you on the advantages of mulch. Now, I planted all of these trees as bare root back in the spring before weed seed started to germinate, and all of this area looks great. Now over here I have some of my older citrus trees that have been planted for years, and everything looks great and is relatively weed free until, oh, what happened here? This is one area of ground that I did not mulch, and just look at the crazy amounts of weeds that are germinating around this unfortunately dead red lime tree. You'll see where I did mulch, it is virtually weed free. Where I did mulch over here, it is virtually weed free, but yet we have tons and tons of weed seed germination in this one area that I chose not to mulch because I thought this tree was not going to make it and I would be digging it up come summer, and it looks like I was right. And as a result, the area is overwhelmed with weeds. As important as the weed suppressing abilities of mulch is, even more important during the summer is the ability for mulch to block evaporation and preserve moisture in the soil. So here we have my old dead snap peas, which I had already harvested, and I'm letting the roots break down to refeed the soil. If I dig down in this unmulched soil, it is dry as a bone down here. I'm at least 3 or 4 inches deep right now, and there is no moisture at all in this soil to be found because we haven't gotten any rain in a week. It's just like dust. Look at it. It's like powder. You can see it blowing. All we are is dust in the wind. But if you go back over to my fruit tree area where I planted these trees back in the beginning of spring, I haven't really watered these in probably about a month and a half or so. And if I just uncover the mulch, you will see it's pretty shocking how moist this ground is under here. In fact, wow, look at, there's earthworms moving around in here. Underneath the mulch cover, it's actually probably a little bit damper than I want it to be, honestly. But it really shows you a great visual. Hey there, Mr. Earthworm or Mrs. Earthworm. You'll see down here where I did provide the mulch, even though we haven't had rain in a month or so, it's still plenty moist. Now, when it comes to selecting a mulch, basically any kind of natural mulch is going to be just fine. Don't use a dyed mulch, don't use stone mulch, don't use rubber mulch. Just use a natural true mulch like shredded hardwood bark, pine bark nuggets, wheat straw, what have you. You can even go into the woods and you can get pine needles, you can rake up leaves and chop them up. You can use grass clippings if they haven't been treated with any kind of herbicides and pesticides, and they're free of weed seed tops. You can use your own free mulch if you wish. You can even go to the county and get your own free mulch. The only thing I really want to caution you against with mulch use is if you live in a place with cool late springs or early summers, you may not want to apply mulch right away, because if it is still cool, damp, and wet where you live, when you actually mulch the area, it will keep the soil more moist for a longer period of time and keep the soil cool. So if it's still very cool where you're at, you may not want to apply mulch yet. Don't apply the mulch until it actually gets warm and the soil becomes at risk for drying out. But once that happens, that is when you want to apply the mulch. And the 5th and final task that gardeners should be doing in June is protecting their plants from high heat and high UV by installing shade cloth above their plants. Now, at first, this may sound like something that only people in very warm climates with very long persistent hot summers should do, like folks that live in the desert and in the south. But that is where you would likely be wrong. What I have learned over the years is that the overwhelming majority of things that we grow in our garden, things like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, squash, melons, etc. They are not pioneer species. They don't grow out in the open in fields. They come from tropical and subtropical areas where they grow underneath forest canopies. They are a forest floor species, an understory species. So because of that, where they adapted to grow, they do not get full sun. Yet here in the United States and other temperate regions, because we get frost and freeze, it's recommended that we plant our plants out in full sun, because in order to condense their entire lifespan into a 4 to 6 month period so they can fruit for us before the frost and freeze comes, we have to put them out in full sun to force them to grow at a much faster rate. And that is where we run into problems. Now, in their native subtropical and tropical habitats, they have as much time as they want to collect solar energy through dappled light through the forest canopy and form the flowers and fruits and mature fruits and reproduce. So there's no big rush to them completing their life cycle in their native habitat. There is a big rush for them to complete their life cycle where we live in temperate regions. So because of that, we put them out in full sun that they never adapted to grow. A good way that you can think about, is it too hot and sunny for these plants, is if you're naked on the beach where you live, could you sit out in full sun for 10 hours without getting burnt? Or would you be cooked alive, and could that actually kill you? If the answer is yeah, that could do a lot of damage, chances are the full sun is too strong for your plants too. The sun out in the open is absolutely cooking right now, but if I go underneath this shade cloth, it is like a whole new world. You could kick back, grab yourself a drink, put down a lounge chair, and it is nice and comfortable. These plants are not dealing with nearly the amount of solar stress that they would be had the shade cloth not be up there. Now, where I live here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, I am at latitude 34. So I have found that the best time for me to put up my shade cloth is right about at June 1st. That is when the sun becomes way too strong for my plants. If you're north of me, I used to live in New Jersey and Pennsylvania up at 40 degrees latitude. And if I still lived there, I would probably put up shade cloth in July and for most of August. If your latitude is south of me, shade cloth is absolutely mandatory. I talk to so many gardeners every day, and it blows my mind how many people that live in Florida, Texas, Southern California, the desert, you don't use shade cloth. There's no way your garden can survive throughout the summer without using shade cloth. I use 40%, but if you're in southern Florida, if you're in South Texas, if you're in the desert, if you're in Las Vegas, Phoenix, Southern California, what have you, you may even want to experiment with 50 to 60%. You may think that your summers are just too hot to grow and that the sun always kills your plants. I'm telling you, shade cloth will blow your mind. It's a totally different world under here. It's a totally different climate. If you put this up above your plants, you will not be disappointed. The rule of thumb for me has been when you see that UV index sit at 8 or 9, you can check your local weather station to find out when the UV index is that number. When it gets to that point, that is when you want to add some type of shade protection. And this is an important concept to understand, because even if you live at a high latitude where it doesn't get persistently hot and the heat only comes in waves, that UV index is still really high. And it is that UV index that is scorching your plants, beating them up, and then the stress of that high UV index, just like you'd be under stress if you got a bad sunburn, is what breaks down your plants and makes them more susceptible to pests and diseases. So if you see UV indexes of 8 and 9 or higher, that is when you want to break out the shade cloth. And of course, you also want the shade cloth for higher temperatures. When temperatures start getting in the upper 80s and eclipsing 90, you definitely want to break out the shade cloth to cover them. Rather than drone on forever about shade cloth, I will simply link to a video down in the video description, which is a comprehensive guide on shade cloth. I will also be releasing another video within the next week that will show you how to install shade cloth, and I will make sure to drop links down in the video description for this exact shade cloth that I'm using. It comes in a huge piece, so you can cover a big structure like this, but you can also get it in very small, very affordable pieces as well to cover individual plants. It comes in a variety of sizes, so everything you need will be there. And that right there are 5 critical tasks that nearly every gardener should be completing in June. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I featured in this video, I will place direct links to them down in the video description, and for all of the products that I use in real life in my garden, they will be linked in my Amazon storefront link. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon link, and you'll see everything I use in real life. And while you're down there, check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
Oh boy, look, Daly's got a new toy. Come on, buddy, let's go. Oh, he loves it. He's loving it. Oh, it's got a squeaker. Get it. Oh, he's ripping it already. It only lasts seconds with the beast. Oh, he's going crazy. Look at that tail wag. Ow! Ow! You got my knuckle, buddy. Ow! This needs to sit. Hey, that's cheating. You can't use hands. Only humans are allowed to use hands. Ah! Oh, he's cheating again. Oh, he got it. Oh, I'm never getting it back. Oh, you nipped my knuckle. You knuckle nipper.